My name is Kaderbek. Today we're with IEEE-NU subsection. So before we start, I would like to thank everyone who is attending this event and who is behind the scene. So thank you, and now let's start. Thank you for our guest, Prof.Akhan. So please tell me some introduction about yourself and a little information.
Okay.
Before we start.
So my name is Dr. A. Usually people don't say my full last name, but it's Akhan Al-Magambetov. And I'm the chair of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at Nazarbayev University. I came here in 2020 after spending about 25 years in the U.S. So I did my undergrad, PhD, master's over there, and then I worked, then I came back.
So how did you end up in America?
So basically in 95, I think, my mom applied for her master's program in the U.S. and we moved. So in December of 1995 was the first time that I actually left Kazakhstan and went to the U.S. I was in 4th grade at the time. And basically, we kind of lived there ever since.
So most of your family is academic?
Actually, they're all doctors. So my mom was a doctor, but then she decided to apply for a master's program in like healthcare management or something like that. So we moved to Syracuse, New York, which isn't very different from Astana. Maybe only in temperature, it's a little warmer. But there's a lot of snow in the winter. And, so we moved there, and I spent 2 years in the U.S. Then my mom decided to move back for 2 years, and I completed grades 6 and 7 in Almaty. And that's to kind of diversify my educational background, because she saw that the U.S. educational system wasn't very good. And basically everything that I learned in grades 6 and 7 lasted me until, or all the way through high school and some of college, which was nice.
That's the story.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Can you tell us about your time in Norwich University and your research you conducted there?
So Norwich University was the school that I went for my undergrad to, and I did my undergrad in computer engineering. So in my last year, we were doing some research. I don't know if you've heard of DARPA, Defense Advanced, blah, blah, blah. But they were funding a lot of research at the college level back then, and one of the things was through competitions for underwater unmanned vehicles. So that was a hot topic back then. I'm not sure what it is now, but basically we created a team, and for our capstone project we created this autonomous underwater robot that was supposed to compete in their little competition, so perform certain tasks and things like that.
So it was as a bachelor degree?
Yeah, right.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Our capstone supervisor was very into this, into robotics, and he kind of helped us along the way.
So I think most of our viewers are students and bachelor degree or even higher. So can you tell me more about that? How did you manage to accomplish this, and was it working or?
So it was half working, but I think we got second place there within the schools competing in the Northeast of the U.S. So it was pretty intense. Basically, we were working on this pretty much 24/7 since the start of Capstone, and then we had stuff 3D printed. Back then, 3D printing wasn't too big, so I think that was using like some polymer sintering or something like that to 3D print. It wasn't like deposition. It was subtractive manufacturing. So we made the case, we made all the electronics, and we went for a competition. But it was really challenging.
How many states participated?
I'm not quite sure, but there were a lot of teams because it was like a nationwide contest.
I imagine. Yeah. So Because it's a bit not bit. It's much difference. There is much difference between Kazakhstan and USA. So when you compete in Kazakhstan level or USA level, it's totally different.
Yeah, well, the main difference is I think that U.S. schools have a lot more funding.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I guess. But as students from Kazakhstan, the one thing that I've noticed is that they can work on a shoestring budget. So they don't have any money, but they are able to do really amazing things, which is what sets them apart, I guess, from their U.S. counterparts.
I see smiling faces on the scene, behind the scene. So I think it's true because I remembered when you said that, I remembered my words of my father that everyone can do it with money. Can you do it
Right.
without it?
That's true. And that's a big problem for like U.S. companies as well, because they have like money thrown at them and they don't really use it effectively, right? So I'm sure you've heard from the news that the Department of Defense, which funds all these things, is the one agency in the U.S. that has no accountability, and they're losing money all the time. And that's because they just, kind of throw money around, and companies don't really innovate. But when you have very limited funding, then you have to innovate, right?
Yeah.
To be
That's
on top.
when engineering coming.
Right, yeah. So
You have to be creative and create something new, or on top of that, that's unknown.
that's true.
So when we search for a background, we need it because
Okay.
we were having a guest. So could you describe a bit about children's book that you've written?
So I wrote this in 2012, before the birth of my first daughter, my oldest daughter, and it was called Sunny Bunny and the Rainbow.
Yeah.
And basically, back then, I was really concerned with how is she going to fare in the world, right? And there was a lot of bullying, especially in the U.S., at the high school level, at the middle school level. And I decided to write this children's book, which basically covers the topic of bullying. That you can persevere despite, everybody being very mean around you. And so I wrote this children's book, and I was trying to find an illustrator for it. And eventually I did. So now I think it's very close to being published. But it was like a 10-year journey.
Yeah, and
get
you
it
did it
out.
with your academic career.
Well, right, yeah. So actually, writing is my hobby. And if I wouldn't have picked engineering, I would have probably become a writer.
So how is it possible that you choose two different, absolutely different spheres, or are they close for you?
So I think to begin with, I chose engineering kind of randomly because I liked it, obviously, in high school. But I was really good at non-engineering things, right? So I was never good at math and things like that. I was acceptable, right? I could do all the stuff that was required of me, but I wasn't exceptional. And then in my high school years, in ninth grade, I met a teacher who was teaching computer engineering, which was kind of very unheard of. So my school district had a program. It was called a vocational program, where students were taught trade skills, right? So something that you can learn and then go out and do after you graduate from high school, if you don't go to college, let's say. And Brian Brown, so he was my instructor for the computer engineering class, and he really got me thinking about engineering. And eventually I said, well, this is what I want to do. But initially I was like a liberal arts major, I guess.
So one person that changed your mind about your lifestyle.
Yep.
Good. Can you? So, is it the teacher, instructor, or person that you want to you for yourself in the future, or that can change the thoughts about some sphere in the life?
So I guess you're asking if there were any role models, right?
Yeah.
So there were three people that influenced my life. So it was Brian Brown during my high school years, and he made me think about engineering as a possible career opportunity. Then there was Dennis Tyner, who is my role model for teaching. And this guy was amazing. I mean, he could sell ice to Eskimos. Very charismatic. I don't know, he had a way with students because he could explain anything in a way that the students could understand, no matter how complex. And I met him in high school, actually, during my junior year in high school. And I went to Norwich University for like a week-long summer camp. And he taught us Laplace transforms, Fourier transforms as junior students in high school. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So then I went to Norwich because I completely fell in love with him. And I had him as a professor, and we still talk to this day. But I model my teaching on his example. And there is Ron Lessard, whom I also met during the engineering summer camp. And he's my role model of how to be a good human being, I guess. So, yeah, 3 role models, all doing different things.
Good. So how did they change it?
Well, I'll start with the last one, Ron Lessard. He was, I guess, there at the right times when I was kind of doubting myself. And during freshman year, no, actually, my first semester sophomore year was the most difficult for me.
Yeah, I'm now experiencing
So
that.
you are, right? You're in your second semester sophomore year, right? And I was really, it was the first time when I had to work, right? Because before that, studying came very easily. I could basically just do nothing and get A's. And when you hit your sophomore year, this is when you start working. And it was like a very abrupt transition for me, and I was really depressed. So I remember this one time, I was ready to quit. And I called him at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh.
I was like crying because I couldn't understand anything. And his wife answered, and he's like, Ron, come to the phone. It's one of your students. So he comes to the phone, and we talk, and he explains, well, engineering is difficult, but you have to persevere and stuff like that. And there's one thing that he said to me that I kind of still carry with me to this day. He said that all the music that you need is in your heart. So you can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter what people think about you. You basically have everything that you need to succeed. And I kind of followed that advice, and I come back to it very often because obviously in my adult life there are situations where I'm very stressed and it seems like nothing is going my way, and I kind of think about that and truck forward.
And about teaching, what do you find most fulfilling about teaching students?
So it's, sorry, my voice is kind of low because I've been talking all week. It's when the light bulb moments happen. Like, for example, the student doesn't get anything, and then suddenly everything comes together, and they're like, oh, I got it. Now I can do it. So those are the most fulfilling moments in teaching. And those are the moments that kind of remind me of why I chose teaching versus going to industry and making a lot of money. And every time that happens, I guess, is a very special moment in my life.
So for the haters who says that all the professors in the Nazarbayev University not in the industry, that's why now you know why, because of you. They want to see your faces, they want to see your insights, and they want to share your heart.
Well put. So in industry, actually, people just frustrated me because they want to do typically the least work possible, and nothing ever changes. Everything is, especially in the US, up until recently, this was the case. In most companies, there's something called the old guard. So people that have been with a company for 50 years, and whenever young engineers come in and they're like, oh, I want to change the world, I have all these ideas for you, they're like, oh, let's not do anything. And that's unfortunate because a lot of companies suffer. Like Boeing, you've heard, it was very close to just being bankrupt after having like 3 huge engineering failures. And I always joke to my friends that they're one engineering failure away from completely going out. But that's because of the culture. So a lot of companies have this old guard kind of culture where they are not very perceptive to new trends or not very perceptive to new ideas coming from new graduates. And that's, as a new graduate myself, I guess, well, I'm not a new graduate anymore, but back then it was very frustrating. So I said, I'm just going to academia, where people of the same mindset can network, I guess.
So about USA, and not only USA, but mostly about university that you worked in, what's the similarities and differences have you observed between students at NU that you're seeing now and at USA?
So one big similarity, I guess, is that they're hard workers, although the percentage of hard workers in U.S. schools is dropping quite significantly. And also they think outside of the box, right? So I've gone to the regions, I've gone to other universities in Kazakhstan, and Nazarbayev University is actually very close to a U.S. university in terms of like freedom of thought. People are not scared to kind of put forth new ideas, which for engineering is critical, right? Engineering is all new ideas. And basically, if you have that freedom, then you can do whatever you want. So that's, I guess, the similarity is that they think outside of the box, and they're very stubborn. Because if they want something, they'll get it, which is nice. Because like at other institutions in Kazakhstan, what I've noticed is that people are very scared to kind of put forth new ideas, mainly because of, I guess, the way they were brought up. But Nazarbayev University kind of opens up that box for them.
And I think it starts with the foundation year. When you study in there, you see that professors are like instructors, and they share their emotions and their feelings too. That you can ask questions. It's always welcome, and sometimes you can talk about some forbidden topics.
Right. Yeah.
So, and about life and about university, what tasks that you give to your students that prepare them for their careers in industry or in life?
So I always tell my students that I hate memorization, and I hate when you have to memorize something to make it work, right? Usually, the way I configure my class is that I go from the very basics upward, and it might not be very theoretical, but it's very hands-on. So once my students kind of graduate, they can apply that knowledge right away. And even though some students don't see it when they're taking the class, but then they come back like 3 years later and they're like, I got my first job, and everything that you taught me was useful. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. But yeah, I try to stress more practical things in my classes because I think that's very important. Theory will only get you so far. If you can't apply it, then you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, and you can't apply it. You don't see where to apply it.
Right. Yeah.
So about the students, can you tell, and can you revisit your freshman year? If you could revisit your freshman year, would you consider choosing a different major? And yes, or then why?
If I could go back to my high school, then I would probably choose a different major. But by my junior year in high school, I already fell in love with engineering so much that there was no way back. So if I were stuck in my freshman year right now, then I would probably not change. And even thinking about like all the hard times during my sophomore year, so sophomore and junior years are the hardest for an engineer. I would probably not change because very exciting. I was actually supposed to be a doctor because I come from a family of doctors. Like my grandfather and grandmother were doctors. My mother, my dad, who I don't really speak to right now, but they're all doctors. So, you know, it was a natural shoe-in for me. But for some reason I rebelled in high school, and I said, I want to be an engineer. So that's what happened.
Okay, thanks. And did you experience moments of doubt regarding your choice of major?
Many. So like I said, you know, sophomore year was a make or break year for me. And it was probably the hardest year of my life, if I were to think about it, because I was faced with this dilemma, like, did I pick the right thing? This is my entire life. It's too late to get out. You know, all these questions were popping through my head. But thankfully I had somebody very close who was able to steer me in the right direction, and that guy is Ron Lessard, one of my professors from college.
So you chose the right college to visit?
Yeah, I think so. So they definitely supported me. When I was doing my graduate studies, I did them at Syracuse University, and it's a big, it's called a Research 1, R1 school in the U.S. So basically their research is of utmost importance. They want professors to bring in multi-million-dollar grants, right? And sometimes, not in all situations, obviously, but sometimes students get overlooked. So as I was going through my graduate studies, I kind of saw that, and I was very sad to see that some students were falling through the cracks. And even though engineering might have been for them, even though they liked it, they weren't able to succeed in the program just because they didn't have somebody that was coaching them along. So yeah, I guess I picked the right school.
And how do you go about creating a comfortable learning environment, both in your teaching approach and within your classroom?
So I always think to my own years in college, right? And I never teach above that because I know that students are going to have a problem, right? A lot of professors, they just kind of teach theory and a lot of theory, and they're a little bit disconnected from their students because maybe they did their undergrad so long ago that they don't remember the same problems that we went through.
Sometimes it feels like
right.
that.
And but I always try to put myself in the students' shoes, and I never give them a bite to chew that's too big. And I think that's my main, I guess, mantra in teaching. Because if you make it too complicated, then students lose interest.
And about the comfortable environment in your classroom. So we have some pictures of your students. Okay, I'll show it one by one. Okay, before we start, all of them agreed to show that, and now you can see it yourself. So first, you see it yourself, I think. Can you describe or tell me more? I think for our viewers it will be interesting. And why did you choose to?
So,
and why is that?
I usually ask my students to complete their course evaluations, and to make sure that they've completed them, I ask them to upload a selfie with their screen saying, "I've completed the course eval." So it's just a fun thing, and some students they go all out, and they're very creative. So yeah, it's really interesting to look through them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one more. What do you feel about it?
It makes me happy that students are taking it in stride, I guess.
Yeah.
Even though we had a very difficult semester, I think at the end it all comes together.
And for the students, and I think engineering mostly, and any student who feels stressed, can you share us with how do you manage and cope with the stress and pressure?
By walking very fast. So I think sports are a good way to unwind, and like in college, even if I was super, super stressed, there was a long series of railroad tracks by the campus. So I would just walk on them. And you could basically walk from town to town on the railroad tracks and the bridges and stuff like that. So that was my way of kind of letting the steam off. And I would walk for 3-4 hours. Then I would come back, and everything would just make sense. So I think integrating sports or some sort of like activity like that, physical activity, helps definitely.
So I just thought about that, and yeah, that's true, because when you feel stressed, you have to go to sport, and even then you just need to crack yourself like in the sport,
Right.
and make it better.
That's true.
Thanks. And about the students, some of them, and we saw some of ratings, and that do you read students' reviews on platform like ratemyprofessor.com, and what your thoughts about that?
So I think it's good because it's a very candid way of evaluating a professor. Obviously, some professors might write their own or whatever, but the overwhelming majority of reviews are from students, and you can really see through the fake reviews. So I like it. I think there needs to be more of that, and if all students kind of express their candid opinions on professors, because even for like course evals, nobody completes them, and I want to tell everybody, please complete your student evals, because as the chair, I can't see what's going on if you don't do that. Yeah. So make sure to complete your student evals. But with Rate My Professors, I think it's really nice because students get to fully express what they feel, and then other students can look at it and say, well, do I want to take a class with this professor or not, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a good idea.
Can you discuss the research you're currently involved in, or your previous researches?
Okay, so I'll talk about the research that I'm currently doing because I think it's pretty exciting. So right now I'm working with my colleague Jacopo Gentilini. He is the owner of an organic olive farm in Tuscany, Italy. Yeah, and he wasn't like that before. So basically, we worked together at Embry-Riddle when we were teaching engineering. And in 2018, he left, and he said, I'm done with academia. And he went to Italy and bought an olive farm, and basically completely immersed himself into figuring out how it's done. And he did a lot of research prior, but basically he had a lot of catching up to do in terms of the practical aspects. And now he owns a farm, and they produce really awesome olive oil. And we're collaborating on a research project that will basically automate the olive growing and the olive picking process. One of the big problems in Italy is that a lot of the younger generations, or a lot of the members from the younger generation, they don't want to work on the farm. Right, so they want to go to the city where the internet is faster, and blah blah blah, or work remotely somewhere. So they're all leaving the farms, and that's unfortunate because Italy has a huge history of these olive farms, right? So now what they do is to collect these olives. They basically invite a company that gives visas to migrant workers. They come, they collect, and they bill quite expensively for this, right? So a typical bottle of olive oil, which is like 750 milliliters, probably €5 from that cost is just the cost of labor of collecting olives. And then it's €1 for the bottle, and blah blah blah. So it adds up, right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to automate this process of data collection throughout the growing season, because another problem is that we have a very experienced person, and it's usually just one person on the farm that looks at the olive and he says, well, it's time to pick. today. And everybody's like, well, how did you decide that? And he's like, well, I know. So they pick them. So what we're trying to do is basically collect a lot of data and use machine learning to organize it in a way that we can correlate it to what this guy is saying, right? So olives need more water today, olives need less water, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully, in the future, this will be completely automated.
So we are making one person that describes everything, say it to the computer, and you're connecting them.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think it's hard because when you ask someone who is doing it naturally to explain that in order to write it, it's even harder.
Right. Yeah.
Because he doesn't understand the way that other people think.
Yeah. That's true, and we're also trying to do it non-destructively. So the robot that will collect the data, it won't pick any olives, right? It will just evaluate it based on how the olive responds to different frequencies of light or something like that. And in the future, we also want to integrate the functionality for collecting olives, because one of the biggest problems is in Italy, the olive trees are quite old on some farms, right? So they can be like 300 years old, and yep. And I think there's a 3,000-year-old olive tree that still bears fruit or something in Italy. I've heard about it. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But they're very picky trees, right? So if you touch them wrong, they won't bear fruit. So for example, in Spain, what they do is it's some of the cheapest olive oil, and the reason why is because they plant it they plant all the trees in a very regular pattern, and then they have machines just completely destroy them year after year by collecting in an automated fashion. And it's basically aimed at very, very high yield, right? So they want as much olive oil as possible from this orchard, which is bad because whenever you're using very violent mechanical methods for collecting olives, then you're destroying the tree. So in 15 years, they basically have to cut all of them down and replant. Obviously, they have some orchards that kind of go through these cycles. Yeah. And that's not very nice. So in Italy, what they want is, they have some varieties that are very exquisite and that have been around for, thousands of years, and they want to preserve that. So the more gentle we are with the olives, first of all, the better the quality of the olive oil. And the trees basically will thank you for it later. So we're trying to do a very non-invasive way of collecting olives. And we're doing that by modeling what the actual workers do. Basically, there's a rake that is electrically operated and that does this. And the workers very gently kind of, comb the trees for olives. And we're trying to do the same with the robot.
Can you elaborate about previous researchers? So, I want to note that you're doing it hands-on mainly. Yeah, right. Because the project that you were involved in the bachelor degree, undergraduate, and now here, you see, I can see that the string that's connecting them, that you see engineering as a close-up, not as theory, only theory, but that engineering is the way, the tool that improves life.
Yeah. So it's actually the most exciting and the most depressing part of research, right? So when you're doing hands-on research, because a lot of the time you're very invested into this idea, right? You're like, this is going to work. You put it together and it doesn't work. And that's the most depressing moment. But then you learn something from it, right? If it doesn't work, there's probably a reason, right? Yeah. And then you do something else and it works, great. You move on. So I try to pick my research problems and projects that are very hands-on, right? Because it's the most exciting if it does work. Some of my previous research, when I was in my PhD, I worked on traffic applications of computer vision. Back then, computer vision was very new. right? So basically anything that you came up with was brand new. And back then, I guess one of the things that was published in papers frequently is this awesome computer vision algorithm, blah blah blah. There's a full paper on it, and then at the very end of the paper, in the results section, they say, but it takes 499 seconds to process one frame. So 499 seconds is like close to 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
For one frame of video. And usually the authors kind of brushed that off and they said, well, when GPUs are better, or back then, CPUs get better, this is not going to be a problem. And I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
So what my group and I came up with is an agent-driven approach to computer vision. So basically you have like 12 agents that are doing very simple things, and the output of each agent goes into this arbiter system that basically determines whether something is detected or something is not detected. And it's a lot more efficient because it can run in real time on very simple hardware, and it yields close to the same results as this really awesome algorithm that takes 500 seconds to execute per frame. So that's like a glimpse of my past research too.
So can I say that it's truly an engineering approach to the problem? Because what is engineering? We can start from here.
Well, engineering is a variety of things, right? So both approaches are valid. But to me, engineering is something that can be applied in a practical way. It doesn't matter how good it is on paper, right? If it can't be implemented, it doesn't matter, right? So that's I guess my takeaway.
Can you repeat it to
Sure.
the camera? Yeah.
So for me, I guess engineering is about making something practical, right? That works. Because no matter how good something is on paper, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't work in the end, right?
So students, just try it, and if it doesn't work, try it better. Thanks.
So, yep.
And about your research, academia, about your industry, what are some of the significant sacrifices that you have made on your path to success?
Well, I usually make the sacrifices for my family. And one of the things that I kind of still regret to this day is I was offered a position as a patent attorney at a big law firm in Washington, D.C. And then I thought about it, and that would be me working from morning to night, basically every day. So all day, every day, I wouldn't see my family. And I said, well, I want this, but I'm going to go with something else. So then I went to teaching after my PhD.
So, okay. Why do you regret it? You love the job, or you see opportunities?
It's something that was always interesting to me. I guess as a patent attorney, you see a lot of things that are brand new, and you kind of are always in this environment of innovation. But it doesn't matter right now. I'm perfectly fine where I am. But I think my life, A, would have been a lot different, and B, maybe I would be dead by now because I wouldn't take health into account.
That's true. When you overwork,
right?
you're
Yeah.
failing. So we're closing to your professional career, and what about IEEE? Mainly, where IEEE and you, Nazarbayev. Sorry, I'll start. Where we are Nazarbayev University IEEE student branch. So, and you are a member.
Yep.
Can you elaborate at that, and why did you choose that path, and and benefits, of course?
So IEEE actually gave me a lot of opportunities along the way. And it's not just, something that I can put on my resume. It was actually some tangible benefits that I got. So as a student, as an undergrad student, conference registrations were very cheap. We were able to attend workshops and things like that. There's this Young Professionals Society within IEEE that kind of ties you to people in industry. So if you have questions or if you need some job advice or whatever, you can always fall back on these guys to help you out. And I think being part of a professional membership is really valuable because at any point in time, I can contact the members and say, hey, I have this problem, help me out. Whether it be research, whether it be personal, like, looking for a job or something like that. And the more years you are in it, obviously you're eligible to apply for senior membership later on. So for example, I transitioned to a senior member in 2015, I think. And that's basically when you are with an organization for 10 plus years, you can become a senior member. And that opens up a lot more opportunities, obviously. But conferences, I think, are the biggest thing, because if you're especially looking to publish, you get discounted publication fees as a student, you get discounted registrations for conferences and things like that. So it's definitely worth, I think it's like $35 a year, right?
No, it's 14.
14, yep.
Yeah, 14 for student
Region 8,
members.
yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
student members.
Yeah, so it's definitely, it's like a couple of cups of coffee, right? And you have a membership for the entire year, so definitely worth it.
So we also have our societies within our university and in Kazakhstan subsection. So I would like to say, join us.
Yep, definitely.
So we're closing up, and it's unfortunate, and because I want to know more, and I think our viewers also want to know more. What are the topics that you'd like to share, or do you have that you want to touch that were untouched during our questions?
I guess I'll I'll share a piece of advice, right?
I think three pieces of advice you'll give, and then, or is it? If that's all, we can close to the advices.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we can fast forward to the.
Okay. Yeah. So, what are the three advices that you would give? Sorry. What are the three advices that you would like to give to the Nazarbayev University students?
Okay, so first of all, don't despair, because things are not always going to go your way, right? And sometimes times are going to be dark, and you'll think that this is it, I can't do it anymore, and stuff like that. But eventually, the clouds are going to go away, and you'll be able to do it, because you are an engineer. So just don't give up. I guess that's my most important piece of advice. Second piece of advice is always take care of yourself, because I see a lot of people that, they go through school, they go through industry, they work, and especially when it relates to sleep, right? They always think, oh, I'll sleep it off during the weekend, or I'll sleep it off, during my vacation, or, when I retire, I'll relax. And you shouldn't take your health for granted, because when you're young, it doesn't matter. But as you get older, the problems are going to come if you lead that lifestyle. So no matter what, I guess, think of yourself first, because if you're not there, it doesn't matter what you do. Yeah. Right. And that's, I think, very important for a lot of students, right? And the last piece of advice is to always try to kind of teach yourself to think on your feet, meaning that no matter what the situation, try to always find a solution. And I think that students in Kazakhstan don't have that problem. In the U.S., that would be a piece of advice that I would give my students. But in Kazakhstan, what really impresses me about students is that they will always find a way. If there's a little crack, they'll go through it. And that's, for professors, sometimes that's very frustrating, because, like with cheating and whatever, doesn't matter. But with with just life in general, that's how you have to operate, right? Don't be, I guess, don't let little failures kind of prevent you from thinking outside of the box and trying to figure out what to do. So that's my biggest piece of advice, I guess.
So, students, it's now your turn. As our professor said, you don't have to give up. Take care of yourself and always be creative. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It was an honor to have you here, and we and you IEEE student branch. So see you next time.